I wanted to talk a little bit about the basics of what a consultation call is and what you can expect to get from one. So a consultation call is usually 15 to 20 minutes that you can have with a mental health professional ahead of scheduling an appointment with them, where they're able to detail out what kind of a relationship that they have, what kind of practice that they usually have with their clients, and how it is that they might be able to help you before you make the process of going through an intake with them and paying for the appointment. Consultation calls are usually free, and it's usually a bit of a fact-gathering mission, both for the client and for the therapist. There's usually a couple of different objectives going into a consultation call that you can have in your mind that would be important to try to notice when you are having the conversation with the therapist. One is, are you a good fit for them? Are they a good fit for you? And is the practice that they're using going to address the problem that you have? To break those down, it may be that you are a good fit for them and they have a skill set that could help you, but you're turned off by the presentation of the therapist. It can also be the other way around, where you feel like they're a good fit for you, but they don't actually have this skill set to be able to help you. So it's sort of like, oh, I like this person, but I'm not confident if they've actually got what it takes to actually help me. And then third is the intervention that they actually practice. What is it that does? And does that third thing in the room, the bulk of the conversation that you're having, match a solution to the problem that you have? An important question to ask yourself in advance of a consultation call or going into an intake appointment is to ask yourself the miracle question, which comes from solution-focused therapy. It's not required to use solution-focused therapy in your treatment in order for this question to be really helpful. It basically outlines the question: if you wake up tomorrow and a miracle happens and all of your problems are fixed, what does your life look like and what is different? The second part of that question is to ask you what's getting in the way from you having that right now. And the third question is, what can you do about what's in the way? Oftentimes when I ask this question to clients, it's a bit eye-opening that they had considered all of the things that were going wrong in their experience, but when they're actually asked to consider what would things going right look like, it's kind of like oh wait, what would things going work look like? I hadn't really considered that. It's happened to me many times before too, where we just don't ask ourselves the question. If you ask yourself that question, that third question is where the therapist is able to help, and you're able to ask some specific questions. What is it that your practice is going to be able to offer what I'm struggling with in order to help me to get to where I want to go? It can be helpful for you to be able to identify specific things that you would like to be able to see from the outside. So as opposed to, I'll feel more confident, or I'll be happy, or trying to make observations about your feelings, we'd like it to be, what are the behaviors that are surrounding that happiness, that are surrounding that confidence? I would have more friends. I would be confidently going into dates. I would be dating more frequently and putting the reps in. I would be going to the gym. I would be eating healthier. I would have a toolbox to be able to address the depressive episodes that I periodically have. Those might be some of those clear cases of a win condition being succeeded at, and then you're asking the therapist, what is it that you do that helps me with that? When you are asking the therapist, what is your style and what do you do, there are a couple of things to potentially be wary of. Most therapists are trained to give the answer that they are eclectic, which means that they do a little bit of everything. It can be important to have somebody that has a guiding therapy that they're the most confident in. And you can ask that pretty straightforwardly of, out of all of the different treatment modalities that you have, what's the primary treatment modality that you use, and what are the general objectives for how it works and how it gets results for people? it can also be important to specify, how is it that that therapeutic style interprets the problem that I have? And the idea there is going to be that if the therapist can interpret your problem through an evidence-based treatment, which means not their opinion, not what the therapist thinks, but what their therapy, the philosophy that they follow. There are several counseling schools, and they all have their own thing to say about what's going on, and a lot of them are very evidence-based to consistently get results. What does that have to say about your situation? So as an example of what that could look like, I tend to specialize personally in helping people with perfectionism. And I don't label that explicitly on my profile because I think perfectionism can get mislabeled. And so I'll end up spelling out a lot of the different chunks or symptoms of what perfectionism can feel like. And then I'll have the conversation afterward to connect the dots. And what I'll say is the clear objective is that oftentimes people struggle with being able to determine what it is that they actually want and to be able to converge on something that's valuable to them. I have a system of therapeutic approaches that have been consistently getting people evidence-based results since the 50s. It's a 70-year-long tradition that consistently works at being able to help people to scrutinize how they're labeling things in their mind and to reframe that scrutiny and criticism into value seeking instead. How this works with perfectionism is that we often try to focus on what we don't want to happen. I don't want this to happen. I don't want to be disliked. I don't want to suck at this. I don't want to be judged. I don't want to be abandoned. And while we're doing that, we're not focusing on what we do want. I want to be the kind of friend that people would be proud to have. I want to be the kind of person that people can count on. I want to have a plan for success. I want to be able to move on my ambitions and document my success. And I'm trying to help people move from here to here. An example of this working in a bit of a metaphor is if you're trying to drive to Niagara Falls, can you get to Niagara Falls by telling your GPS where you don't want to go? And it ends up being that we end up spinning indefinitely, recalculating, trying to not get somewhere and then not ever end up getting to where it is that we would want to go because we didn't define where that was. If we just define where we want to go, we automatically avoid all the places that we don't want to go. The therapy that I use creates a troubleshooting guide for doing that independently so that after you learn that skill, you can do it on your own and you're able to essentially become your own therapist. It's a lifelong skill set. That's what I offer people. For the people that matches their problem and it speaks to their experience where they're like, oh yeah, I just keep finding myself second guessing, like, am I good enough? Am I good enough? Am I good enough? And it's kind of like that GPS analogy. I think this person has something that could help me. And if I notice that too, then it seems like it's a good fit and the therapeutic process actually addresses the problem that they're struggling with. One of the things that you can also prep for in advance for a consultation call is to ask a little bit about what does a basic treatment plan look like for the kind of therapy that you offer? What's the beginning and the middle and the end of treatment typically look like? Can you give me an example of how treatment has worked successfully for somebody that you've previously worked with that's emblematic of how it might work for me? If they struggle with coming up with a success case or they kind of go into this, well, it's different for everybody, it is different for everybody. And it's also indicative that they know what they're doing if they can tell you the phases of treatment. That, for instance, in my practice, first we figure out how we're mislabeling things. Second, we figure out how it is that you would like to label things. Third, I help you to come up with habits and routines for living in alignment with how you want things to be. Fourth, we have a bit of a maintenance phase where we're making sure that that's sinking in very directly and that you've got some sort of a process for error correcting that if something goes wrong in the future. That's a treatment window. That's how it works. That's how it gets broken down. There are a lot of therapists that don't think in a very compartmentalized way, and they may give you a more intuitive story about somebody that went through what you're going through, and we went here and then we talked there, and that may actually be what you're looking for in the kind of therapy that you're after, and that's okay, as long as they can show you that they have some evidence that they know what they're talking about and that they can help you to get success that you believe in. Another question to reinforce that first one is to ask, how long does treatment usually take? And if you, again, will get varying answers of well, it's different for everybody. I personally have clients that I've been working with for more than 3 years, but the bulk of my clients, probably 80% of them, graduate within 3 to 6 months or have reached that maintenance phase by 6 months. And sometimes we're still doing some maintenance and some fine-tuning at the end, but the bulk of their anxiety or troubles are largely resolved. They're using the skill set that we've been talking about, and it's largely putting the reps in as opposed to discovering something new. If you do get a lot of waffling, or people give you an outrageously long number, sometimes it can take 5 to 10 years for therapy, that may very well be the case for some people, but it's usually not the case for it to be that way in ideal conditions. And you'd like to be able to ask, what does this look like on average? And if it does look like they're trying to be a forever therapist, potentially consider that in the decision that you're making with whether or not to work with this person. Another thing that you can ask is, what are the signs that my situation would be working? What are the milestones along the way that I would expect to find that might help me to know that the therapy is actually working, as opposed to it being a complete mystery as to whether or not I'm spending my time wisely? If I'm answering this question for my clients, it would be, for example, being able to monitor our language, the needs, shoulds, and have tos, for how does the language that you use make a difference in the emotional experience that you have. You'll start to notice that, and you'll create a little bit of a muscle memory. You'll start to be able to notice, oh, I'm doing it to myself, and that's a checkpoint in the therapeutic journey. You're going to be able to see pretty consistently, where is it that I'm getting my strength from? Where does my enthusiasm come from? What are the things that I can do to see that happening consistently? For instance, if you're able to plan a weekend, and after that weekend you have a lot more energy than when you started with, and it genuinely feels refreshing, as opposed to, it's a Monday again, and you have this scoff and this inner angst, that would be a transitional point at which we would know that therapy is really taking hold and it's starting to work. If later in treatment you start looking at more things as opportunities, and you're able to see, oh wow, there's so much that I can do with this, and there's so much that I can do with that, and that thing that I used to be worried about is not even a concern anymore. I'm on to bigger and better things. And you're planning ahead as opposed to reflectively looking backward all of the time, that's also a sign that treatment is succeeding. And so on. Every therapeutic school is going to be using different mechanisms, and it's going to be focusing on different things that it's trying to succeed at. So there isn't some sort of a master plan that I could show you that's the same for all therapies. But those general questions may be able to help you with being able to have a productive consultation call, to be able to make sure that the person that you're working with actually has a tool that can help you. Therapy isn't advice. It's not opinions, which is what I'm connecting advice to be. Advice is the opinion of, because this was my experience, I think you should do this, which isn't a system of logic. It's not a therapeutic school. It's not a therapeutic philosophy. It's just one person's experience informing another person's experience. That's not enough. Therapy is a scientific art form. It's a science in that it consistently converges on a certain kind of truth, and there's mechanisms for being able to do that, whether that's taking a look at our language, whether that's breaking down where our problems come from, and it consistently tries to label things a certain kind of a way scientifically. And then there is an art form of how does the therapist bring that generalizable thing into your experience specifically. You do want it to end up feeling like you're having something interpreted or translated for you, and that you end up having some sort of a changed experience as a result, as opposed to being talked at or being chatted with. I hope that helps. Stay tuned for more to come.